I am a forest ecologist who has been studying the ecological interactions of plants and animals and the environment in the canopies of rainforests in tropical and temperate regions. I've come to understand and document the critical ecological values that they play to maintain the tapestry of the healthy forest. I myself have benefited from the ecological values of being with trees, and many of us are aware of the many values that trees and nature provide for people: ecological, health, economic, and spiritual values. But not everyone has access to nature because of their physical or cultural or economic or even legal barriers. Many people live and work in places where nature, especially wild nature, is not apparent or is physically far away. And this is increasing with greater urbanization and more virtual rather than real experiences. I think this has led all of us to walk a knife ridge between despair and hope. If we fall too far on the side of despair, we become immobilized. If we lean too far on the side of hope, we expect others to act. And this situation has led my colleagues and my students and me to explore how we might bring science and nature to the incarcerated, one of the most nature-deprived populations in our country, and one that it is most hidden away. There are over 2 million adults and 50,000 youth who are incarcerated in federal and state prisons, in county and city and tribal jails, and in juvenile detention centers. And as collateral damage to the punishment of incarceration, they live and work in habitats that are almost entirely without nature, both in their cell blocks and the environments around these facilities. This is true both for the incarcerated people, but also those who work there. Well, as an academic who is privileged to study trees in forests and wild places, I have documented the many ecological values of trees and written about them in my scientific papers. But I felt I needed to do something to more closely link those who live where nature is not to the benefits of nature. In 2004, I started a science lecture series in the state of Washington with positive results. This has spread to the other state prisons in Washington state and to other prisons around the country. We've carried out evaluations of the impacts of these lectures with our pre and post-lecture surveys. We have documented that the men significantly increased their science knowledge content, increased a positive attitude about science and scientists and their own capacity to learn science, and their behaviors of sharing what they learned at these lectures with others, with their families and with their cellmates. The success of this lecture series led us to collaborations with conservation groups. Our first collaborators were the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. The conservationists there taught the incarcerated men at the Cedar Creek Correction Center how to rear the state-sensitive Oregon spotted frog from egg to tadpole to frog to adults, and these adult frogs were then released to protected wetlands. We've also collaborated with the Nature Conservancy. The men at Stafford Creek Correctional Center rear 300,000 plugs of rare and endangered species of prairie plants for the ecological restoration of prairies in Washington. And the women inmates were trained to rear the Taylor checker spot butterfly, a federally listed species, from egg to larvae to adult. In 2011, I moved to the state of Utah and started a similar program there. We taught the men how to build nesting boxes for the American kestrel, which is in decline across North America. We've also expanded in 2017 to reach youth in custody. We work in 5 juvenile detention centers in Salt Lake Valley. We bring science career lectures, art science workshops, and conservation projects, such as the youth rearing milkweed to create way stations for the migrating monarch butterflies. In 2014, we expanded our reach by bringing nature imagery to men and women in solitary confinement cell blocks. They live in these tiny cells, 9 by 12 feet, totally concrete, totally divorced from nature. We could not bring lectures or soils or frogs or plants to them. And so we began bringing nature imagery to them in the form of nature videos. For 1 hour a day, they are taken to an exercise room, a slightly larger room than their cell, where they're allowed to walk around. They can see these nature videos. In 2014, we started a study at the Snake River Correctional Institution, a supermax prison in Eastern Oregon. We gained access to a cell block that is in 2 parts with the same control room, the same officers, and the same risk of prisoner. On one side of the cell block, we put a projector that showed nature videos to the men on that side of the cell block. And the other side of the cell block, we did not show nature videos. After 1 year of showing nature videos for just 1 hour per day, we came back to the inmates, we interviewed and surveyed them and found that they self-reported that they felt calmer, they felt less stressed, less aggressive than they did before. And most importantly, what we found was that when we compared the violent infractions, we found that the men who watched videos committed 26 fewer violent infractions than those cellmates on the other side of the cell block who did not watch nature videos. So this was a benefit to the incarcerated men, to the officers, to the administrators of that prison, and also to us, because the men felt more connected to nature. We also monitored the effects of the scientists and conservationists who interacted with the incarcerated and found that they gained a greater sense of social justice, became more aware of the ills of mass incarceration, and took actions such as joining Black Lives Matter and writing letters to their congresspeople to increase educational funding for those who are incarcerated. We understand that these small actions do not cure the ills of this severely unjust system of mass incarceration, but it does bring some light to those who encounter these activities in a very dark part of our society. And so I think it allows us to work further along this knife ridge of despair and hope, moving us more towards hope than despair, and continuing to involve us in bringing nature to those who do not have access to it. These are small actions, but I did some calculations and found that of the 325 million people in the US, 6.2 million are scientists. And when you do the division, very simply, if each scientist talks to just 52 people each year, that's only one person a week. Our collective work will then have touched every single person in the United States, informing them of the benefits of nature for humans. I think this is something that we in academia, who are sequestered in our ivory towers with great privilege, can keep in mind as we think of the importance of bringing nature to those who are deprived of access to it. Not just for those who are incarcerated, but office workers who work in cubicles and don't have access to nature during their workday. Senior assisted living centers are places where many people live who do not have access to nature, but can well appreciate it and have benefits from it. People who work in factories who don't have access or even a view of access to nature could benefit. And those who work, for example, in toll booths and are surrounded by nature or surrounded by traffic and concrete each day for 8 hours of their workday can benefit from nature as well, but we must bring it to them. So for those of us who are able to work and recreate and understand nature and have proximity to it, I think it behooves us to think of ways that we too can share it, to involve all of us in this tapestry that connects people with nature, something that, like a real tapestry, is complex, is connected, is useful, and is beautiful. Thank you very much.